Supergirl is one of the most widely recognized and popular DC superheroes of all time. She has been around for decades and has served as an inspiration for untold fans and has consistently made appearances across countless DC adaptations, whether it is animated or live action or games or anything else. But despite all of that, there still lingers a question as to what Supergirl is supposed to be about as a character. A lot of adaptations tend to do their own thing with Supergirl, and it sometimes ends up having nothing to do with what the character should be about, and in the worst cases, she even ends up being written like a female version of Superman with no distinguishable characteristics of her own, which I feel like misses the point of the character and also cheapens her existence and worth as a superhero. Because if you're doing a female version of Superman, at that point you might just as well do Superman. What's the point of Supergirl? And the biggest example of this is CW Supergirl, which was basically just female Clark Kent for a lot of seasons. This is an issue that the comics have also faced at various points, whether it's because of editorial mandates or whether it's writers not having the proper knowledge about the character or them just trying to do something different. There was even a certain point where DC was insistent that Superman be the only Kryptonian to ever exist, and this led to the formation of Matrix Supergirl, which had nothing to do with the well known Kara Zor-El version of Supergirl. Supergirl has been consistently rebooted in the comics, and while the Kara Zor-El version remains the most prominent and popular version of the character, there have been plenty of other versions of Supergirl which were vastly different from what Supergirl was supposed to be. Even with Kara Zor-El, writers try to experiment, and it's always a good idea to experiment. But it's just sometimes it doesn't work out as they try to make her too much like Superman, or they stray too far from making her be an actual compassionate superhero. Kara has many interesting layers to her as a character, especially her trauma, her anger issues, and PTSD. But for the most part, those are always ignored, which is a damn shame. She's such a complex and powerful character who is constantly treated like a kid, and sometimes he just ends up being forgotten by the DC universe, and which is just really weird. Kara knows and remembers Krypton in a way that Clark never can. She considers herself a Kryptonian first and foremost. Clark was raised on Earth as a human and as such always considers himself human first, unlike Kara. This is a very simple but profound difference between the characters, and very few writers actually acknowledge and use this difference. Kara's PTSD and survivor's guilt are important aspects of her character, and it should be acknowledged and explored more. The best Supergirl stories have always remembered that and used those aspects of her to challenge her, and I feel like that's generally the best take of the character. I know there are people used to an extremely wholesome, kind hearted, and childlike Supergirl, but I feel like there are a lot of other superheroes who can better satisfy that role. Kara's backstory and her life experience makes her one of the most unique characters to ever exist, and that's something the best Supergirl writers have acknowledged and expanded upon. That brings us to the most recent Supergirl adaptation in My Adventures with Superman Season 2. While the show drastically changes a lot of Superman characters and Superman lore, I feel like it generally does a good job maintaining the spirit of the characters. Of course, there are a few misses here and there, but for the most part, I feel like it's doing a good job, especially with the main characters. I had high expectations for Supergirl in this show after they confirmed her appearance, and after her first full episode in the show, I was already in love with this version of Kara. I was expecting something new, and it definitely was that. It was an extremely different version of Supergirl, and it was nothing close to what I expected. But it retained the spirit of the character in a way many adaptations have failed to do, even the more classic versions. In this world, Supergirl is introduced as a would-be conqueror of Earth, but we are also introduced to the real Kara, who is trapped under the control of Brainiac, and she actively suppresses her own thoughts and emotions, believing they make her weak, and her only purpose is to be the best warrior for Brainiac that she can be. It was a fantastic new take on the character, and I was really impressed. Hell, they even give Kara even more trauma than usual by having her realize that she was forced to destroy multiple worlds under Brainiac's control, and the moment she realizes that is portrayed in the most crushing manner possible. You already know that she is going to need a lot of therapy to get over it, and that is if she ever gets over it. In this world, Clark and Kara are closer in age, so they have a sibling dynamic which felt refreshing compared to Superman usually being portrayed as an overprotective father figure to her, and their interactions were absolutely entertaining. I always believed that Supergirl should be closer to Clark's age instead of being stuck as a teenager, especially since there are various other Kryptonian characters who better serve that role. When she first comes to Earth, she cannot fathom the idea of Clark risking his life to save fragile human beings, and over the course of the season, she slowly understands the value of human beings, and in the end, she manages to get past her previous conceptions of people and Earth and bravely stands up and fights for the people of Earth, making for an epic heroic moment. Her crush on Jimmy Olsen was endearing to witness, and I liked it, despite generally not being a fan of Jimmy and Kara being together. When she finally became Supergirl and wore her Supergirl outfit in the final episode, it felt like the culmination of her character arc over the season, and it also worked as a triumphant and earned moment of success for the character, and you can't help but root for her character. She was easily the best part about the entire season, in my opinion, and it quickly became one of my favorite adaptations of the character simply because it dared to do something different while also understanding the purpose of the character and making her someone unique. In my opinion, change is always fine as long as it's executed well and it has a certain purpose to it, and I think that's why this adaptation of Supergirl worked. It's not a classic definitive version of Supergirl, and I wouldn't regard it as a template for how Supergirl should always be, but it's a damn good version of her and understands what kind of character development she should undergo and how she should be characterized. This Supergirl adaptation is the perfect example of doing something different and unique with an iconic character while staying true to the spirit of the character, and I'm very excited to see how they handle her development in the third season. I would love to see them further explore Kara's rage and anger and trauma, which she definitely has plenty of right now considering the life she's had and the experiences she's had in the past few months, and the fact that she's now in a whole new world with none of the people that she grew up being around. I hope this next season does an even better job with her.